Greetings, welcome. Thank you for joining us here today for Everyone Counts, our webinar series today. Our topic is the U.S. Census 2020, a conversation regarding how we are creating a new world. I am Reverend Dr. Stacy Cole-Wilson, the Executive Minister of Justice and Service for the Baltimore-Washington Conference of the United Methodist Church. Reverend Rochelle Andrews will be our moderator today, and we just invite you to journey along with us. If you have questions, I invite you to place your questions in the Q&A section below. And beyond this webinar experience, if you will join us for one of our recordings, we just invite you to write your questions down and submit them to us when able, and we will make sure that we get a response back to you. To watch the recording beyond this moment, we invite you to go to our YouTube channel, BWC UMC, our YouTube channel. And I also just invite you to just take a moment to look through all of the other webinar series that we've offered to date. God bless you. I give God thanks for this team. We have Reverend Sonia King, Giovanni Arroyo, Ann Price, Jan Taylor, Reverend Rochelle Andrews, myself, and Andrea Johnson. They've labored hours to bring this for you today, and I just give God thanks for each of them. Will you just take a moment to pause in silence and prayer with us this day? Gracious and eternal God, our Savior, we honor you. We thank you for being the Most High God and the one who has poured your image into human flesh. We are carriers of your breath, and you are mindful of each one of us. So we lift before you the cries of your children here and around the world as we together seek justice, your justice, and seek for it to be realized equitably for all of your children. We give you glory, honor, and praise. Interpret every groan. Guide us now and forever. In God's name we pray. Amen. Reverend Andrews, I invite you to welcome our guests for today.
Good morning, everybody. I am so honored. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Stacy Cole-Wilson, for allowing this opportunity for us to share with our congregations important information that'll help as we deal with disparities throughout our congregations and our communities and the world. I'm excited to have today with us Jordan Colbert, and actually on the other line, you don't see her, but you will be able to hear Jacqueline Woody, both of whom are from the Census Commission in Prince George's County, and they will be talking about the census overall, not just Prince George's. And so we are so happy to have them here with us and the amazing amount of expertise. I actually was on the faith-based Census Commission for Prince George's, which is how I first kind of met Jordan. And, I love her because she didn't know me, but I asked her questions like, well, I actually serve in Montgomery County. How could I do this? And so she was always so very helpful for even places beyond Prince George's, which was why when we came up with this, I really wanted to have her on there because she understood the holistic picture that we were looking at as a conference, not just the one part of the county, which is, where she's, specifically at. So with that said, I will now turn it over to her.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Reverend, and so much for the conference to be a part of such an important conversation on the census, especially in the times that we're in right now. Again, my name is Jordan Balcom Colbert, and I am the census coordinator for Prince George's County, but I partner with Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland, different counties throughout. So I've touched many different jurisdictions in terms of what the challenges are and how we want to grow in 2020 in terms of our outreach. So what I'm going to do now is to share my screen with you, the presentation slides, so we can get started. So everybody can see my screen. Okay, so what is the census, the basics, right? I think at this point, everyone kind of understands where this comes from. It's a constitutional law that happens every 10 years. And every 10 years, the U.S. Census Bureau does a population count of the people that live in the United States, the entire United States, including Washington, D.C. And so it's mandated by the Constitution, as I said. So the census has 9 basic questions about the people that live in your household, no matter what their citizenship status is, Question a lot. The citizenship question is not on the census, so that's another layer of concern that we don't have to worry about when completing our forms. So everyone that's living in your household should be counted in terms of the census. You can do it on phone, by the phone, online, or by mail. This is really unique this year because it's available online for the first time. And given the pandemic and the state that we're in as a nation, it's very accessible for residents to just go online and complete the form. The census commenced in March, early March 12th, and it will end on the 31st. Generally, the census kind of ends around at the end of July, but because of the pandemic and the social distancing policies that have been implemented throughout the nation, the Bureau has made it its business to make sure that we have ample time to get our residents counted throughout the entire state. Why your questions matter. Billions of dollars in federal funds that go to a lot of the important programs that we receive in terms of WIC, SNAP, Head Start, but most importantly, timely right now in terms of vaccination availability. If you have a certain amount of individuals, say you have 10,000 individuals that live in one area, and only 5,000 complete their census forms, well, how does the government know that they need to send 10,000 vaccinations, right? So right now, we need this data, because if this happens again within the next 10 years, we'll need to know what resources we need. Emergency resources, medication, and medical needs are really vital right now. So that's why the census matters in terms of federal funding. They also do a drawing of the legislative boundary lines. That's very important in terms of congressional seats as well. How many representatives you get in the U.S. House of Representatives. If you have a lower count, extremely lower count, then you may lose some seats for your congressional district. If you have more, you may gain representation, and representation really matters to our residents and the importance of making sure that we have strong leadership. This is a snapshot of the sample questionnaire. Like I said, basic questions about the people that live in your household. They ask for, how many people live there, how many additional people are staying in your house. And that's important because while you think of those that are blood, you may have someone that is not of a relative. You may have someone that is renting a home renting a room in the basement. Everyone that lives in that household should complete the census all in one. However, there are some instances where you may not know the person that lives in your basement or in the multi-dwelling unit with you. So you may want to encourage them to go online and complete their form independently or complete it together. So there is no right or wrong way to do this, but the Census Bureau is going to aggregate the data regardless of how it's completed, but it's definitely encouraged to complete it by household. Residents received that code in the mail in early March to go online and complete their forms, but you don't need the code. The code is something operational for the U.S. Census Bureau, but we also want to encourage residents that when they log into the online portal, there is an option that says, I don't have my ID code, and everything that you see right here is enough information for them to generate, to identify who you are. So participation, when we talk about federal funding, we talk about money that trickles down to our communities. And so in Washington, D.C., over the course of 10 years, each person is worth about $45,000. Maryland is about $18,000, and Virginia is $12,000 over the course of 10 years. So you think about the number of people you have in your household. If one person is missed, then that means that, for example, in the state of Maryland, that additional person, $18,000, is not going to that community. And it's definitely based on probably the not only the population, but the locality rates and property value and all of those things and resources that go into each state, because each state is different. So this is a photo of a poster that our planning department created for our regional area. This postcard should be seen in some of your medical facilities and offices. Kaiser Permanente was one of our partners, and Council of Governments, which covers a lot of the regional area, also endorsed and sponsored this as well. So we wanted to make sure that we had something that spoke to all of the different communities. How to help create a just, safe, and accessible, affordable, equitable world that we live in. And so some of the important things that we want to discuss when we talk about creating a safe place is we want to address privacy concerns head on. So in doing so, we want to make sure that if you're talking to your neighbor, your congregation, your faith ministry membership, you want to stress the importance of privacy. Wrongful disclosure from a U.S. Census Bureau representative is subject to $250,000 or imprisonment for 5 years or both. This is really, really key because a lot of individuals find that their privacy is going to be compromised when they complete their census forms. So this is something that we're asking our members and our leaders and partners to push at the head of the conversation. Personal data is not shared with law enforcement. This also comes into play when there are undocumented immigrants that fear that their information will be disclosed to ICE or some type of law enforcement officers. The Bureau is not allowed to share that information either. This is something else that's key. The Census Bureau will never ask you for your bank or credit card statements, your political affiliation. This is a nonpartisan program, and they won't even ask you your religion. It's against the law. These are basic questions about the people that live in your household. So we would encourage our listeners and viewers now to make sure that they share that message with their family and friends. The data is collected for statistical purposes only. They want to make sure that they have a robust information so that they can service different communities, communities of color, young children, any resources that fall within that jurisdiction. The Census Bureau wants to make sure that they have that sufficient data. And I talked about how you can go online and complete the form by phone or by mail, but you can also, it's also in 13 different languages this time. So this makes it a little bit more broader for many different people to go and complete their forms. And the cybersecurity program for doing it online, they've been testing it over the course of years. And so it's encrypted. So once you submit your information, it goes on to the next channel and it's done. Historically hard to count populations. Children under the age of 5 are the highest population to count. The hardest population to count. Why? Well, there's several different reasons. You have moms that have newborn babies that don't know, well, maybe my kid doesn't go on the survey. I'll just include the adults in the household. And so there's a misunderstanding that every living person in your household, not the dogs or the cats, not yet at least, to include on the census form. And so additionally, you have caregivers, grandparents who also take care of their grandchildren, maybe 5 days a week, maybe during the school year, and then they go back to their parents. Where you intend to stay or you spend most of your time, where you lay and rest your head, is where that child should be counted. So those are some examples of why children go undercounted. Immigrants and non-English speaking individuals. In terms of non-English speaking individuals, sometimes there may be a language barrier. So we're hoping that we can curb that with the 13 different language options that the census is available in. Additionally, you may have someone that is an immigrant coming to this area that may not be aware about the census or may have some questions, something that's not traditionally practiced elsewhere. So there may be some hesitation in terms of completing the census and not knowing about it either. College students, if you live in California and you go to school in Maryland, at University of Maryland, for example, you may think, oh, I want my money to go back to where I came from in my hometown. However, you use the infrastructure here in Maryland, you take the public transportation, you use the hospital. So the goal is to complete your form here in Maryland because the resources you want to go back to the community. So those are several examples in terms of hard to count communities. I'm open to answer any more questions on this subject as we move forward. Other challenges right now that we find very interesting is messaging communities that lack interest. Some residents, especially right now, are not focused on the census. They don't see it as a sense of urgency because it's not in your face. And you also, it's not tangible, right? You can't see the actual money trickling down to your community. However, when you may not have, when you have overcrowding in schools, for instance, and not enough resources, but you have ample amount of students, you can actually see that this is something that should be of interest to the community. So there are also oftentimes where we have a hard time encouraging residents to complete their census because it matters, and everything around you is basically somewhat federally funded and brought down to the community. Persons impacted by COVID-19, some of the things that our partners have done throughout the region is meal distribution. Residents are constantly seeking need for food and meals and resources. So the census is not at the forefront for them right now. They're focusing on jobs and they're feeding their families. So this is another issue. As an example for you to kind of change the narrative on that, is the pair materials, census materials, with meal distribution. This is something a lot of the faith-based communities have been doing. They've been very involved and we find it successful. We have some palm cards that we have. Our partners have palm cards and resources that you can pass with the meal distribution that makes it a lot easier to achieve the goal to serve the community, but also educate the community and remind them. And then access to the internet and telephone. This is something somewhat of our seniors may have some issues in terms of internet access, or just individuals that might not have a smartphone to complete their forms. At one point before COVID, we were having the library serve as hubs to have residents come in to complete their forms, but now we are transitioning into a different way of engaging residents. So some phone banking and assistance over the phones is usually available for those that don't have access to some of these resources to use as a tool and a guide. How to increase participation. Education is very important. I know we can't do that in like so much time. You may come across someone in your faith-based community or a leader to inform them about the census, but it's important, it's safe, and it's easy. Those are some of the talking points that we give in terms of why you should complete your form. And so making sure that everyone is educated enough to know that the federal funding piece is what's needed, and we won't get this 10 years back. 2030 is when we'll have our next census. So we don't want to wait that long. We want to do it now. Community outreach, anything that you're doing in terms of revivals, any types of programs that you may have amongst your groups, I would encourage you to utilize those events to pass out literature or just say an announcement about the census. Trusted voices and partnerships. The faith-based community is one of the most trusted voices. So we're asking leaders to actually share that information with their members via email, robocalls, any way that you can, can talk about it being a census Sabbath, using terms like that, census Sunday, one Sunday, highlighting a era for residents to complete their census after church, and after programs. So any bit of information you can give during these outreach and community events by using your leadership is helpful. And then consistent visibility, making sure that you have some type of posters or branding materials. I know that our community has passed out yard signs, anything that you can do to remind folks to complete the census. Traditional outreach, we talked about that a little bit in terms of trusted voices, but the other thing is door knocking. I know that the social distancing is being a little bit more flexible in different areas throughout the region. So if door knocking or hanging flyers somewhere on the door is feasible for you and your community, you can do that as well. Workshops like this, webinars, this is something that you can consistently do. Our team has developed resources for the community to use in their own leisure, so they can do that. And then social media is really big. You would believe how many people follow you on social media or listen to you and you can reach people. Just one post can maybe reach somebody that has forgotten about the census right now, that may be educated about the census, but it slipped their mind. And then social distancing options, telephone banking. You can say, today I'm going to make 5 phone calls to my family members or to my membership. And out of those 5, you'd be surprised, you're probably half of the people that have not completed it yet. So increasing your numbers, this will definitely help with increasing your numbers. Community resources. The Census Bureau and a lot of the different local planning departments put together maps. And these maps are based on census tracts in jurisdictions in terms of how the Census Bureau pulls their data. And so when you go and utilize some of these response rates maps, you're able to manipulate them and zoom in and see, okay, how many people have responded. And they do this about 5 times a week now. They used to do it daily, but now it's 5 times a week. After 3 p.m., they'll populate the information and you can see what your response rate is, your self-response rate is for your area or your jurisdiction by census tract. So that's something else that's helpful. The U.S. Census Bureau has downloadable social media graphics that you can use, a lot of promotional material. So everything you need down to language and how to post and what to post and videos are all available online. And then they also are hiring. The Census Bureau is hiring and they are in need of census takers because they're getting ready to commence their in the field operations. So all of those people that didn't get a chance to complete their forms earlier on are now gonna be reached out to. And so you can get job information at censusjobs.gov. Additionally, partnerships. This is going to be really key. If you have a big following on social media or you have a big congregation or faith community, having those trusted voices speak out is really what's going to be the source in terms of pushing and increasing those participation rates. Local complete count committees. They are very helpful and informative. You get information and you're able to disseminate it to your community as well. Elected officials, colleges, and campuses, these are other places that are able to reach more people. So this is something that I would encourage you to do in terms of partnership. And so that wraps up my segment. Again, I'm Jordan Baucom-Colbert. This is my contact information here. I do have my colleague who is also a big part of our coordination initiative. Her name is Jacqueline Woody. Her contact information is there as well. And these are the websites and telephone numbers for where you can get more general information or complete your census at my2020census.gov, or you can call. There's English and Spanish options, but again, there's 11 other languages that you can get and receive information as well. And jobs are also at the bottom as well. Does anyone have any questions that came through the poll?
I don't see any yet. Jackie, do you have something you wanted to say?
I'll say good morning. Yes, thank you so much. And I am glad to be part of the project coordination team with Jordan doing our outreach throughout the Prince George's County in particular. Jordan indeed is the expert for covering the rest of the state and the region, I think. But again, I can be of support for the work that we're doing in Prince George's County. And I guess the only thing that I would add is that if there are individuals who want to be able to help residents or people that they know filling out the census, then we could probably give you some connections to help you learn how to do that. Some people, we at one point wanted to do Census Hubs, and we were not able to do that. And some of those locations were going to be in our faith-based organizations. So we still want to offer the opportunity to help people if they need help filling out their census. So the contact information here will help with that also. Thank you.
Now, I did have a question. What about, so I have two. First of all, what about those people who are unhoused? How do we count the homeless, and how as faith-based groups can we help with that?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just gleaned over that. So homeless communities are counted through partnership with the U.S. Census Bureau. They work with what we call group quarters, homeless facilities, colleges, universities, senior facilities. Those all fall under, and even military bases fall under group quarters. They work with one person or a few people on site to make sure that individuals in that category are counted. Homeless individuals per se, if they have visited a soup kitchen frequently or a homeless shelter, they will be counted with the facility coordinator and the Bureau. However, if there are individuals that don't frequent those different places that live elsewhere, what they do is they contact the local Department of Social Services to coordinate a point in time count of homeless people that live in various places throughout the city or throughout that jurisdiction, and they try their best to count them. Now, there may have been some instances where you have some faith communities that have meal distributions or soup kitchens. If you find that someone that is homeless that has not been counted, you can also reach out to us or your local complete count committee member to connect them with the Bureau so that they make sure that they get counted. So that's of importance. So in terms of the, you said homeless community and you said the faith community, correct? So with the faith community, the Census Bureau has been working in partnership with our local complete count committee for over a year, making sure that they do outreach. So they started this earlier on, way before the summer, before July. And so what they did was they made sure they did presentations. They made sure that they touched different communities that were traditionally hard to count to make sure that they had the resources they need to function. Now, because we're moving into virtual faith programs, this is something that is a bit of a challenge. And so the Census Bureau still continues to work with us in partnership along with our complete count committee to make sure that these members are counted. So that's generally how it works. Jackie, did you have anything else to add?
I do not, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jordan. I also have a question.
Sure.
Thank you. In your presentation, you gave some figures as it relates to how much each person, I guess you would say the cost of a person over 10 years.
Yeah.
You see 45,160, Maryland 18,250, Virginia 12,170. And I just wanted to know if you could write what your participation is worth per person over the course of 10 years, which is roughly about $4,116 in DC, and how that number is influenced.
So this study was done by an organization. I can send the link to you to share with our participants, but a study was done, and I really think it's, like I said, based on locality. You know how each state has job locality, property value, resources, cost of living in terms of nature. That's how they decided it with this study. And so this is something that the state planning department and their big complete count committee has decided to push in terms of numbers. And so these numbers are based on a study over the course of 10 years. And it includes, like I said, basically the federal funding that you get from different resources, firefighters, hospitals, all of that. So it's beyond my study, but they do have a study on it, and I can share that link with you. And each of the stats are across the entire nation. They'll give you what the estimates are, and we like to expand it for over the course of 10 years so that you can see every decennial, this is how much money your participation is worth if you utilize the census.
Mm-hmm. So just in DC, every vote that's not counted, or every person rather who isn't counted, that's $4,516. That is not allocated.
Annually, yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And you think about it like, you know, you can complaining about the pothole down the street or not having a new facility or, you know, everything that you see around you or a new grocery store, because businesses, they use census data to determine where they want to set up their new entrepreneurship. And so if you don't see, you know, a healthy food store on your corner, you know, times there are business owners that look and say, okay, where am I going to get more bang for my buck? They even do it down to inventory. How much inventory is being sold in this area? You know, whether I want a strong laborer, someone that has the skill set, they utilize census data to pull this information. And so all of these things, you know, trickle down to the cost benefit analysis.
Wow. I had a question for you about the issue of, because some churches I've heard are afraid about the whole with political. Can you speak to the fact of how this is a nonpartisan thing? Because I think that's where some places, I've had some churches who've kind of had a little bit of pushback about the census because they're just thinking of it as a government and then they're going with sides.
Yeah, so what we tried to do earlier on, which is really hard, it's unfortunately, fortunately, right, too, because voting is very important. Doing this around the time when you're voting and, you know, getting the messaging out, you would think, oh, okay, this is another political thing. Everybody's talking about it. Legislators talking about it, elected officials talking about it, they're talking about it in the Supreme Court. How is this not political? But it affects everybody, right? So at the end of the day, you know, everybody's going to have a say and stake at promoting the census or having not having participation in the census. It's in the Constitution. You include everybody regardless of your citizenship status. So then that kind of knocks out the myth that it's just all political, right? Because with voting, we know there's different ramifications and requirements for voting. But all you have to do is have some intent to stay here in the United States and you live in that household and you're counted. So I think those types of comments can dispel some of the political questions that they have. And like I said, everybody's going to have some type of interest in the census, whether you're an average person or you're an elected official, because it comes from the Constitution.
Okay. Reverend Stacy, you have any other?
I do. I'm wondering. So, with quite a bit of, I guess, frustration by some as it relates to voter, I won't even just say voter suppression, but just suspicions around if persons' votes count, and in consideration of the great value of this data, the 2020 census data. How can one be sure that their data has been recorded and applied in those spaces where it's most needed? I know you get a confirmation once you complete it, but I also know once I completed it a second time, because I wasn't absolutely sure, I didn't get a notice saying that I had completed it earlier.
Okay, yeah, so like you said, you do get a notification generally. Logistics, right? You'll get a notification that you completed it. If you're not so sure, you can call that number that we have at the end and, you know, say, hey, I don't know if I could submitted my form, just verifying. They may take you through some proper precautions because it's still supposed to be secure. It is secure, but you can probably follow back up just to make sure. In worst case scenario, if you do it again, they're able to weed out the duplicates. So whatever makes you feel comfortable. In terms of saying, okay, how do I know that these resources and these fundings are going to be trickled down to my community? You'll see it in the growth in terms of over the course of 10 years, right? But just like voting, where voting, I feel is just not about you, it's about your neighbor. So the more people you tell, the more you'll be able to see, hey, this really did impact my community because I did everything that I could, and based on response rates, I'll say specifically Prince George's County, when you have an undercount, like we did. We lost $363 million in federal funds because we missed about 19,000, estimated 19,000 people. When you see that, you realize, okay, that $363 million in my community, I could see where that could have gone. So it may not be something, like I said, tangible, or you could see right in front of your face, but you could also identify that in the numbers, how well you and your neighbors did in terms of completing the forms. And so that's why this is a community effort, right? We really have to hold each other accountable in addition to voting, because when one person doesn't vote, you know, you see in leadership, right? Maybe, you know, there are some things that could have been changed if more people came out to vote. So I think that it's just based on experience. There's no way we can look at the numbers with some tangible eyes, but we also can see it over the course of 10 years. And once we get that data, because the data will go to the President of the United States, no longer December 31st, but the following spring. And that's when the president will get those population count numbers, and we'll be able to see how well we did. And if we are lacking in different areas, you know that, you know, there may be some resources that you may not get over the course of 10 years.
Wow. I think we have greatly underestimated the importance of the census in many ways, especially I think when it comes to infrastructure and things like that. And so for churches, I don't want to make it sound very commercial, but what is the true benefit for us as faith leaders to get, you know, what's a quick, I guess, what's an elevator speech for us as faith leaders to our congregations to help with the census?
Yeah, and just like faith leaders, education is at the top, right? It's of importance, right? And resources are at the top of importance. When you talk about WIC and Head Start and food programs, you know, you have moms and dads that have little kids, and you also have seniors that benefit from the different resources. I say lead with whatever number it is for your community, right? So for us, it's $18,250,000. Did you know that we lose this much money over the course of 10 years, and we lose, you know, medical benefits, we lose resources for our kids when we talk about schools and education? Like, I would lead with your seniors, your children, and that dollar amount. It really wakes people up. You know, how you can have a connection. And then that elevator speech that's important, safe and easy, important because of the financial aspect. Safe, the legal consequences, that you 5 years imprisonment and $250,000 fine for disclosure. And easy, you can go online and complete it in less than 10 minutes, depending on your household size. So, and that all you can say in probably a minute, right? Important, safe, and easy. And don't forget about our seniors and our babies. So I think that would be the best thing that I would share for that elevator speech with our faith leaders.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if there's a document, like just as simple as that we can share with them, like a postcard for faith leaders.
Yes. So I did. I'm going to. I have a couple of Jacqueline Woody has identified what we call a faith action guide that I'm going to drop into the comment section, if I can find it, to share with the users. And if I don't find it in time, I will share it with you subsequently when you do your follow-up. But there is a toolkit for faith leaders, messaging, identifying some ways to speak to your different memberships. So all of that is included, and it's very universal. So we'll send that to you as well. And then there is an overview that, oh, I'm sorry, you can actually see it. Good. Okay, because I never stopped sharing it. Yeah, so this is the guide that you'll see that will send out to you all. And then there's a preview here of how to go online and complete your form. So kind of 101, a 6-minute 101. So yes, we do have resources.
And now, I know you predominantly guys do Prince George's. Do you have resources? Are they the same for rural areas and urban areas? Because like our conference has, like I told you when we spoke, a little bit of West Virginia, but then of course, you know, Maryland could be super rural as well. So, or is it basically the same regardless of where you're at?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Sure. So I know we have the resources. Are they basically the same regardless of whether you're in urban areas or rural areas, or should we get some information kind of a little bit different for our more rural congregations? Because we have congregations, as I told you, up in West Virginia, and then of course the more rural areas of Maryland, which I know that's why our numbers for Maryland are lower compared to DC, as far as what the census means. So is it basically the same information, or is there something we should kind of get different for our conference members that serve rural congregations?
I think it depends. I think you're definitely going to have some different demographics from a urban city to a rural area, right? But the messaging is the same. Everything is impacted the same. The types of populations might be a little bit different, right? Because for Prince George's County, a lot of our immigrant populations are on the inner beltway part. And so we can identify that. And so those self-response rate maps or hard to count maps in local areas will allow you to look in terms of what your who you should be reaching out to. So yes, there's a slight chance that you can find information online that's germane to your community, but the talking points and the way that you reach out to everyone should be universal.
And Jordan and team, certainly that faith action guide that we spoke about, that is general. You can use it for whatever the size population that you're talking about, whatever community.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions, Reverend Stacey?
No, I don't see any. And I just wanted, for those who are in West Virginia and other places and would like to know, the cost to participate over 10 years, et cetera, can we also have that data? How we can plug in, so persons can plug in. If I live in New York, if I live in, there it is, there, she sent it in the chat.
No problem, I found it.
We'll make sure we share this information. Again, we just want to thank you both for being here with us today.
No problem. And that map, I will get that that study that you're referring to by state. So if they want to look in New York and other areas, yes, they can do that. I'll need to make one little update that I saw on the slide and send it to you before you send it out to folks. But I'll make sure that I include that link with that data, and you just click on whatever state you're in and it should come up.
Wonderful. Yes. From Rochelle so aptly said, we represent Baltimore, Maryland, parts of West Virginia, and the District of Columbia. And so we're so thankful that you came to spend this time with us. We know that you could be doing many other things, and we just give God thanks for your dedication and expertise in this area. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I'm definitely honored to present before you and in the conference. If there are any follow-up questions that you have, please feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached at pgcensus2020.org, and we'll do our best, like Jackie said, to connect you with anyone in this region that we partner with for more information on your local area.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And I am a witness.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
To those who joined us here today and those who will watch this webinar at another time. God bless you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.